Yeah, sorry. Time. Time. What is time? What is time? That's a good question. But the answer is very simple. Time is change. If there is no change, there is no time. Normally, or I guess most people, they think time, well, is just there, is a given. In physics, they say it's a dimension, space-time. But it is never explained what that time really is. They just assume the time is there. But that is too easy. You must not assume anything. Assuming the time is just there, okay, why? And who created time? Of course, if I recall correctly, when there is talk about the Big Bang, and you go back in time and you arrive at the Big Bang, then it is said that before that there was no space and there was no time. But even that implies that the time somehow was created during the Big Bang. And that is right, that is true. But the real truth, the real most simple answer to this is to say that time is change. And what does change? Well, the other thing. And the other thing is space. So what we see as space-time is really just space. There is only space. But that space changes. And that changing space feels as if there is time. Now you might think that I'm just playing with words, but that is not true. What I say is that when you say there is space and time, I will argue that I can make it even more simple. I can say there is just space. And space changes, and the change is time. As I said before, time is change. So instead of needing two things, space and time, I just need one thing, space. And that space changes, and that gives, between brackets, the illusion of time. But okay, let's forget it. That is time. Because there is another thing. When you want to explain everything, you have to start somewhere. And there is only one place where you can start with explaining everything, and that is to start with nothing. That is the only sensible place to start. When you want to explain everything, you have to start with nothing. And that sounds simple. And again, that is pretty simple. The problem is that you really have to understand what nothing is. And even by saying this, there's already a mistake being buried into that sentence, because nothing is not. You cannot use the verb to be with nothing. Nothing is not. You cannot use to be. You cannot use is. Nothing is nothing. Remember Shakespeare, Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question. So you have to be very careful when you use the verb to be. So what I said before is that you have to start, that the only sensible thing to do is to start with nothing. And nothing cannot be. Nothing does not exist. Most people, when they think about nothing, they have an image that is still something, very small or whatever. I give an example. When you say, I have a room with stuff inside, like chairs, tables. And when I say, well, remove everything from the room. Okay, we take away the table, the chairs, the television, everything. Remove everything. So everything is removed from the room. And when I then ask, what is inside that room? You normally would say, well, there is nothing in that room. Okay, there is nothing in that room. But then you immediately see the problem. Because when I say that is wrong, think carefully, what is inside that room? There is not nothing, there is space. There is still space in that room. So here you can see that most people use the word nothing in a wrong way. In this case, with the room, the empty room, you cannot use the word nothing. You have to use the word space, empty space, whatever. An empty room does not have nothing inside. An empty room has space inside. And then, when you realize that, you can ask yourself a bit silly question. So, there is space inside that room? Well, to really have nothing, we have to remove the space. Take away the space. That's the only thing left in that room. So, when you remove the space from that room, you end up really with nothing. But then you get a difficult, you arrive at a difficult point. What happens when you remove the space from the room? What will happen in this exercise of mind? When you remove the space, all the walls and the ceiling will collapse together. There is no space anymore. Okay. Think about this. Remove everything from the room, and then you say, what is still left in the room? That is not nothing, that is space. Now remove the space from the room. You see all the walls and the ceiling and the floor, they clutter together because there is no space. Okay. Now take a look at the night sky, at the space, where the moon is, the stars, the sun and the earth. When we are on the earth and we look at the moon, so what is in between? There is space. There is not nothing, there is space, we know this. Oh, die boef. Oh ja, wow. Hij is bozig. Oh, where we are. So, when you think about our space, you think about the earth and the moon. There's space between. So what happens? Again, when you remove the space. Well, just like the wall and the ceiling and the floor in the room, which clutter together, you get the earth and the moon clutter together because the space in between is removed. In fact, all the stars and everything clutter together when the space is removed. So it's like a big collapse, everything cluttered together. But then you can go even further. You say, well, the moon and the earth and the sun and the stars, they occupy some space. And I just said, well, just remove all the space. Then you will see there is no room anymore. There is no space anymore. There is no space, literally. There is no space anymore for the earth and the moon and the stars and the sun. So, but where does the earth and the moon go? How can how can the earth disappear when you remove the space? How is that possible? And there is only one answer to this, and that is that the earth itself is made of space. Because when you remove the space, there is no room, there is no space for the earth. So, by definition, by pure logic, the earth itself has to be made of space. Like the space-time, which we all talk about in Einstein's general relativity, space-time. But I already said, just forget about the time. Time is change of space. And now we can see that there is only space. And that's in fact quite a good thing. Because there is only one thing then. There is only space. Everything is made of space. Space is made of space, but even the earth is made of space. Everything is made of space. And the change in space creates time. Let's go back to nothing. If you start with nothing, and that's a realization, if you start with nothing, you will realize nothing cannot exist. It's impossible. Nothing cannot exist. You cannot say, well, there is nothing and that there is 1,000 years of nothing. That is nothing. Cannot exist. To give a kind of analogy, maybe that helps. Think of a pond, a lake, a pond with water. And the water surface is completely flat. You sit there on the border of that lake, on the pond. You look at that surface which is completely flat. Now, what is the only real thing that can happen? You sit there and you watch, and the water is completely flat. You are just waiting for one thing to happen. And if it takes 1 second or an hour or a week or a year or whatever, the only real thing that can happen to that pond is a wave, a movement. No matter how long you wait, there will come a moment that you see a ripple, a wave. You can say, why? Who is making that ripple? But that's irrelevant, because I will say, that doesn't matter. Just wait. Just wait. There will. Because we have enough time. Wait a week, a month, a year, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 1,000,000 years, whatever. In the end, the only thing which can happen is a ripple. Before that, there is only the pond with a flat surface, but nothing changes. And when there is no change, there is no time. So you can see, if the pond, the surface of the pond doesn't change, there is no time. So there is no waiting. You don't have to wait. You then see that the time starts ticking at the same moment as the ripple, the wave appears. That's the beauty of it. And again, this sounds like a play of words, but it is more like a realization. You really have to understand what nothing is. Then you can see that nothing cannot exist, and it gives birth to something. Like the same, like a flat surface of a pond only can give birth to a ripple or a wave. In the end, there will be a ripple. And there is no cause for that ripple, because it is the only thing that can happen. The only thing. That is the reason why everything exists. Nothing cannot exist. There is no time lost, there is no time. There has to be everything. And that everything has to change. If that everything does not change, there is no time. So there is no time lost. There is no waiting to be done. So you can see directly, start with nothing. Nothing cannot exist. Therefore, there has to be everything. And that everything has to change. And that change gives the illusion of time. No change, no time. No time lost, no waiting. That is the principle. And then you can think about what is that everything, which is created out of nothing? What is that everything? Well, then we go back to the space thing. So here there is nothing. There is not is not the right word. But you start with nothing, and that gives birth to everything, and that everything is space. And that's the space we live in, the space around us. We are made of space, everything is made of space. And that is the one and only thing which is kind of created out of nothing. That is the principle. So when we say there is nothing, or there is the duality of nothing and everything, you also can say there is nothing and space. Space and everything is equivalent. It's the same thing. And the world and what we see, that is a manifestation of space. That is pure logic. That means that whatever science is looking for doesn't matter. Whatever it is they arrive at, they will find it is space. And they have to describe it in terms of space. What can you do with space? I don't know. The general relativity says space is curved. No, perhaps you can curve space. Yeah. Maybe mass is like curved space. I think, for instance, light are waves in space, and mass maybe knots of space, like they have objects called spinors. Spinors are with strange objects. It seems like an impossible knot, but in fact it seems like it's tied up, but it can exist. It can rotate space without being becoming a knot. It's incredible when you see that. So maybe that is the basis of mass, of particles. I'm working on it, but I haven't found really the best answer yet. But I know, I am absolutely sure that you have to describe everything in terms of space, and the change of space is time. So when you look at the theories which exist for physics, you see there the time dimension. That can't be correct. That has to be defined as the change of space. So what will happen in the future, I don't know when, is that science, physics, mathematics, what they typically do is they start with everything. That is what they do. They start with everything, and they try to explain that. They try to find theories which explain everything. Like Newton found a theory is gravitation, and Einstein found the theory of relativity. So they describe, these theories describe kind of the behavior of space and time and everything. And like in particle, like in subatomic physics, you have the quantum physics. There are also theories, and all those theories, different theories, they try to describe what is happening around us. And those are very good theories. All the scientists, they do their very best. But they all know that there can't be 2, 3, 4 theories. There has to be one theory which describes everything. They know something is. They know they are missing something. They don't have to be ashamed for that. That is just normal. But they know somewhere there must be a connection. Well, what I do, I do not start with everything. I start at the other end. I start with nothing. Because that is absolutely certain that everything has to start from nothing. That is the one and only thing you cannot discuss about. That is pure gold, is that. Nothing. So what you could do, and what I have done, is when you start with nothing, you perhaps can build up with logic and you can try to build up a world instead of taking the world and try to decompose it in what it is made of. You can say, well, I start with nothing, and using logic I build up the world. So the first thing which then is noted is that nothing cannot exist. Everything has to exist, and that everything is space, just pure space. And then you get the change of that pure space is time. And then you can see I already have the ingredients which science also has. For instance, in general relativity, there is already space and time, and I have exactly the same starting from nothing. What I'm now struggling with is where to go from here. I have successfully arrived at space and time, but what is the next step? And that is pretty tricky. That is pretty tricky. What the next logical step is? What? When you start with nothing, you cannot jump directly to space with all kind of stuff in it. That's not possible. Because why would you? No, you have to take one step at a time, a logical step. So maybe you start with nothing and you get to space, and I call that a state of space, which I call 1, like the number 1. And then you can say what can happen to that space state. That first space state is not nothing. That must be absolutely clear. It is not nothing. It is really something. It is space, but it's just one state. of space. And then you what is the next step? I'm not sure you can say, do we go back from space again to nothing, which cannot exist, and then you get another one state, and so you get a kind of flip-flop between the one space state and nothing cannot exist, so you get like a binary system, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Or, but you can say, then you could argue that 0 cannot exist and there is no time, so you only see the one state. Or you could say that is difficult. Or you could say the switch from 0, nothing, to 1 and back, that transition between the 0 and the 1, the nothing and the space, that is the real thing. That is what you maybe could say, that I said when there is nothing, there is no time, but when you have the one state also does not change. The one state is just the one state. So the one state doesn't change, which implies there is no time. So even if there is the one state, there is no time. There is only time when there is a change. So when you are in the one state, to what do you change? Back to the nothing state, which cannot exist, and then you have to get to the one state. That is perhaps a possibility, but maybe you can say you also can change into the two state. From 1, you change into the 2 state. And when you are in the 2 state, there is no time, because there is no change. And then there is a change, and you go maybe back to the 1 state, or to a 3 state, or whatever. And that transition, the transition between the states, or the transition, is time. So you can even say that the one state does not exist because there is no time. When you see it like this, you notice that the change from 0 to 1 state, from 1 state to 2 state, from 2 state to 3 state, etc., etc. Every transition is time. So what you in fact see, the logic, is that there is always a flow. There has to be a flow, because when you stop, there is no time, so there is no time lost. When there is no time lost, well, whatever. And we can only not see like outside, but because there is a change, there is time. So that is the logic there. The flow, the change from 0 to 1, from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, or whatever it is, that is implicit. There is, it's not like there is, you need something, you need an action for that. It goes, how do you say? It's by default. it cannot be otherwise than that. The change implies time. The time is like what the fuck?